The transport ship drifted quietly through the black sea of space, its silver hull glinting under the light of a distant sun. Inside, the air was still. The only sound was the hum of engines and the faint rattle of a loose panel in the corner. Mira sat on the cold metal bench, her small hands resting in her lap. She was no more than 15, but her eyes carried the calm weight of someone far older. She wore a simple gray suit, patched in places, the fabric rough from many repairs. Her dark hair was tied back in a short braid, not for style but for survival. Loose hair could be a problem in the wild. Across from her sat an alien officer, tall and thin, with pale green skin and a face that looked like it was carved from stone. His black eyes watched her, though his expression never changed. He was silent for most of the journey, speaking only once. "You understand?" he said slowly. "Why you are being sent away?" Mira's gaze didn't waver. "Yes." He waited for her to say more, but she did not. It was true. Mira understood perfectly well. Her homeworld, Vareen, was known as one of the harshest planets in the galaxy. The atmosphere was thick, the storms violent, the wildlife unforgiving. On Vareen, a person learned to survive or they did not live long. Mira had grown up hunting in forests filled with creatures that could outrun a human in seconds. She had climbed cliffs with winds strong enough to tear the flesh from your hands. She had swum in rivers where even the smallest fish could bite, deep. The alien rulers had always feared the people of Vareen. They called them Deathworlders, not as praise, but as a warning. A Deathworlder could survive where others could not. They were hard to control, hard to frighten, and Mira, even, among her people, had gained a quiet reputation. She had survived storms alone at the age of 10. She had tracked and trapped a venom lizard before she was old enough to be trained. That made her dangerous in the eyes of the rulers. Dangerous things, they decided, must be removed. Her exile had been announced without trial, without argument. She was to be taken to Korath, a planet far from any trade route, known only for its forests of towering black trees and the creatures that ruled them. The predators there were not just large. They were perfect hunters, fast and strong, with senses that could track a breath of air. No one sent to Korath returned. The aliens thought it was a simple solution. Send Mira to Korath and let nature end the problem. The ship shook gently as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Through the small round window, Mira saw the world below. Endless green stretching in every direction, clouds swirling over jagged mountains. In the far distance, she saw flashes of movement, as if the land itself was alive. The officer rose and pressed a button. The rear hatch opened, revealing a ramp leading down to a patch of open ground. Warm air rushed in, carrying the heavy scent of damp earth and something sharper, the smell of a place where every step might be your last. The officer handed Mira a small pack. Rations for 2 days, a water filter, a basic knife. He looked at her for a long moment, as though expecting fear. "That is all you will have." Mira took the pack and slung it over her shoulder. She looked out at the jungle and then back at the officer. "That is all I need." She stepped down the ramp without hesitation. The grass under her boots was thick and wet, bending but not breaking. Around her, the trees rose like black pillars, their leaves wide enough to catch the light in great green sheets. Somewhere deep in the shadows, something moved, slow, careful, watching. The ship did not wait. As soon as her feet touched the ground, the engines roared, and the silver hull lifted back into the sky. The officer didn't look back. In a moment, the ship was gone, leaving only the fading sound of its flight. Mira stood still for a moment, breathing in the air. It was heavy with moisture, thick with the sound of life. Insects hummed in the undergrowth. Distant calls echoed from unseen. Throats Somewhere far off, something huge crashed through the forest. Most people would have run to find shelter immediately. But Mira's first lesson on Varine had been clear. You cannot hide from the land unless you know the land. She needed to understand this place before she chose where to sleep. She walked slowly, her eyes moving over every detail. The ground was soft but uneven, roots twisting under the moss. She spotted deep claw marks on a tree trunk, each one the length of her hand. High above, the branches swayed, and she caught sight of something leaping from one to another, too fast to see clearly. As the sun began to lower, she found a tall tree with a wide base and thick branches. She tested the bark with her hands. Strong enough to climb, not brittle. With careful movements, she began to ascend, keeping her weight balanced so as not to make noise. Halfway up, she paused. From here, she could see farther, the jungle stretching endlessly, the mountains in the distance. She could also see movement below. A creature was moving through the trees on 4 legs, its body low to the ground, its head turning slowly. As it sniffed the air, its scales glinted in the fading light. It stopped under her tree, raising its head slightly, and Mira could see its eyes. Golden, unblinking. It stayed there for a long time, then moved on, disappearing into the shadows. Without a sound, Mira didn't move until the last trace of it was gone. Then she climbed higher, finding a thick branch where she could sit with her back against the trunk. She took out her small pack, drinking only a sip of water. She ate half a ration bar, then put the rest away. The sky darkened, and the sounds of the jungle changed. The day calls faded, replaced by the deeper, more measured sounds of the night. Somewhere far off, a roar shook the air, followed by answering cries. Mira closed her eyes. She was not afraid. She had slept through storms louder than this. On Varine, her mother had once told her, "If you learn the rhythm of a place, it will carry you through the night." Mira listened now, letting the strange music of Korath sink into her mind. By the time the moonlight began to filter through the leaves, she was already asleep, high in the tree, far from the reach of the claws. Below, the night on Korath was not quiet. It pulsed with life, 100 different sounds mixing together into something wild and restless. The air was thick with mist, curling around the tall black trees. In the darkness, every shape seemed alive, every shadow a living thing. Mira sat high in the tree where she had made her perch. Her back rested against the wide trunk, her legs tucked in for balance. The thick branch under her was strong enough to hold 3 of her, but she still moved carefully. On Varine, she had learned that even the safest place could betray you if you became careless. Below her, the ground was hidden under layers of ferns and tangled roots. Every so often, something passed through the undergrowth, sometimes small, sometimes heavy enough to make the earth tremble. The trees here grew close together, their branches tangled into a roof that let only bits of moonlight through. Mira did not try to sleep right away. She listened. Listening was the first skill of survival. She separated the noises in her mind. The high chirp of insects, the clicking sound of something climbing bark, the low, distant hum of a beast too large to move quietly. Hours passed. The mist shifted. Somewhere to her right, she heard the sharp crack of a branch breaking. Her eyes opened instantly. Slowly, she leaned forward, careful not to make the tree sway. Through the shadows, she saw a shape moving between the trunks. At first it looked like part of the forest, but then the shape shifted. Wide shoulders, long arms, a head that turned side to side as if tasting the air. It was walking on 2 legs, but its stride was strange, smooth and quiet despite its size. The creature stopped under another tree and tilted its head upward. Even from a distance, Mira saw its eyes catch the moonlight, large, dark, and unblinking. It stayed still for a long moment before moving again, vanishing behind the thick trees as if the forest had swallowed it. Mira exhaled slowly. She knew better than to think she had gone unseen. The creatures here probably noticed her the moment she landed, but there was a difference between being noticed and being chosen as prey. Tonight the forest was watching, but not yet moving, against her. When the moon had climbed higher, Mira finally allowed herself to close her eyes. She did not sleep deeply. Her ears stayed awake, catching every change in the forest's rhythm. Twice in the night she woke fully, once to the sound of a sharp yelp cut short, and once to the sudden silence of all insects, broken moments, later by the rumble of a predator's growl. By the time the first light of dawn reached through the leaves, Mira was already awake. The sounds of night faded, replaced by the movement of daytime creatures. Bright-winged birds darted between branches, their calls sharp and quick. Something rustled in the leaves above her, and a small, round-eyed animal leapt away when she looked up. She climbed down slowly, testing each step. The forest floor was cool and damp. Patches of sunlight lit the moss, and drops of water clung to every leaf. Mira took out her water filter and found a small stream running between two roots. The water was dark, but when she tasted it, it was clean. After drinking, she began to walk, not in a straight line, but in a slow circle. She wanted to learn the ground around her sleeping tree. The earth here was soft, leaving clear prints. She knelt beside one. It was deep and wide, shaped like a three-pointed claw. Whatever had made it was heavy, and it had passed recently. Further ahead, she found another sign, not a print, but a shredded plant, its thick stalk bitten through in one powerful bite. The marks were clean and deep. She touched the cut edge, feeling how sharp the teeth must have been. Mira took mental notes of every sign. On Vareen, her people had taught her to map the danger before it maps you. She began to understand which paths the creatures used and which places they avoided. She found a patch of low plants with small red fruit, but she did not touch them. The smell alone told her they were not safe to eat. By midday, she heard a different sound, a quick, light movement, almost like the flutter of wings, but heavier. She turned her head slowly. In the shadows between the trees, two bright eyes watched her. This creature was smaller than the others she had seen. No larger than a big dog, with sleek dark fur and long back legs. It stood perfectly still, head tilted. Mira did not move toward it. She simply stood, letting the moment stretch. Then she took a single slow step sideways. The creature's eyes followed her, but it did not run. Instead, it turned and leapt away, not in fear, but as if it had decided she was not worth the trouble. Mira's lips curved into the smallest hint of a smile. She had not come here to be chased. She had come here to learn. As the sun lowered again, she returned to her tree. She gathered a few strong vines and tested their strength by pulling them against her weight. These would make good rope for climbing or for setting traps. Before night came, she also collected a handful of smooth stones from the stream. On Vareen, her people used such stones to make noise, either to distract prey or to warn of danger. She placed them in a small cloth pouch at her side. When darkness came again, Mira was ready. She climbed to her perch and settled in, this time with the stones ready in her lap. She would not attack, not yet, but she would not be taken by surprise, either. The forest roared to life once more, and though she was alone, Mira felt no fear. She felt only the slow, steady excitement of a hunter who knows the first move does not always win the game. Tomorrow, she thought, she would start finding the rules of this place, and once she knew the rules, she could decide how to break them. The morning on Korath was misty and cool. Soft light filtered through the leaves, painting the forest floor in shifting shades of green. Mira sat on a low branch, her back against the trunk, eating the last piece of her ration bar. The sweet, dry taste faded quickly, leaving only the damp scent of moss in her nose. Her supplies were almost gone now. That meant she would have to hunt. On Vereen, hunting was not just about food. It was about understanding the balance of a place. If you hunted without learning, you became prey yourself. Mira's eyes scanned the ground below. Tiny lizards darted between roots, their scales catching the light. Birds flitted in the upper branches, too fast and too small to be worth the effort. Somewhere in the distance, a heavier step pressed into the soil, slow and steady. That was the sound she wanted. She climbed down from the tree, landing softly. Every movement was measured. She stepped where the moss was thickest, where her feet made no sound. The air was still. Even the insects seemed quiet here. As she walked, she looked for signs. Broken branches, crushed leaves, claw marks in the bark. Soon, she found a track. 3 wide, clawed toes pressed deep into the mud, each print the size of her hand. The spacing between them told her the creature had long legs and could move fast when it wanted to. She followed the trail for nearly an hour, moving slowly, pausing, often to listen. The prints led her to a patch of ground torn apart, as if something had rolled in the dirt. The smell here was stronger, not foul, but sharp and animal-like. Mira crouched low. From behind a fallen log, she saw movement ahead. A creature stepped into view. 6 legs, each ending in curved claws. Its body was covered in dull gray plates, like stone armor, and a row of short spikes ran down its back. Its head was narrow, with small black eyes and a wide jaw. It moved with slow confidence, stopping to sniff the air. Mira watched it turn its head slightly, the way predators do when they are certain no danger is near. She did not have a weapon strong enough to harm it, and she did not need one. Today was not about killing. Today was about testing. Carefully, she reached into her pouch and took out 2 of the smooth stones from the stream. She tossed one far to her left. The stone hit a tree trunk with a sharp tock. The creature's head snapped toward the sound instantly. It froze, muscles tense. Mira stayed still, holding her breath. After a moment, the creature stepped toward the noise, moving slowly and sniffing the air. When it was far enough away from its original path, Mira tossed the second stone in the opposite direction. The creature spun again, uncertain now. It made a low rumbling sound, as if frustrated, before finally returning to its path and disappearing into the trees. Mira's lips curved in a small, quiet smile. She now knew 2 things. The creature was cautious, and it relied more on hearing than on sight. She spent the rest of the day following different tracks. Some belonged to lighter animals with quick, narrow steps. Others belonged to heavy, lumbering creatures that broke branches in their path. She learned which trails crossed and which never did. By the time the sun dipped low, Mira had chosen her target for the first real hunt, not the armored creature, but a smaller one she had seen darting between tree trunks earlier in the day. It was the size of a large hare, with thin legs and a long neck. Its meat would be enough for several meals, and its skin could be used for rope or clothing. She set her trap as the forest began to darken. Using 2 flexible branches she built a simple snare and covered it with leaves. She baited it with a piece of bright fruit she had tested earlier. Not poisonous to her, but sweet enough to attract animals. Then she climbed to a nearby branch to wait. The forest sounds deepened. The last rays of sunlight faded, replaced by the cold silver of the moon. She waited for what felt like hours before she heard the soft tap-tap of light steps. The small creature emerged from the shadows, its head lowering toward the fruit, its long neck stretched forward, and the moment its foot touched the hidden loop of vine, the snare snapped tight. The creature gave a startled kick, but Mira was already moving. She dropped from the branch, landing beside it. She calmed it with slow movements, speaking softly as she secured it. On Vereen, her people believed in respect for the hunt. The prey was not the enemy, only part of survival. By the time the moon was high, Mira had cleaned the meat and set it to cook over a small fire. The smell rose into the air, and she kept the flames low to avoid drawing too much attention. The taste was simple, but it filled her with warmth and energy. After eating, she hung the remaining meat high in the tree, out of reach of ground predators. She cleaned the skin carefully and began drying it for later use. The bones she set aside; they would make fine tools. That night, as she sat in her perch, she heard the distant call of the armored creature again. This time, it was closer. She wondered if it had followed her trail after all. But Mira was not worried. She had begun to understand the rhythm of this place. She had learned which steps to take and which to avoid. Tomorrow, she thought, she would follow the armored beast again, not as prey, but as a shadow. The first hunt was done. The real game was only beginning. The forest of Korath was awake long before the sun rose. The air carried a low hum, like the breath of 1,000 hidden throats. In the mist, shapes moved, some small and quick, others heavy enough to shake the ground with each step. Mira crouched in the branches of a broad tree, watching the shadows below. Her eyes were fixed on one shape in particular, the armored beast with 6 legs and stone-like plates. She had followed it for 3 days now, learning every habit it had. It liked to walk along the same paths, stopping at certain spots to dig in the dirt or bite leaves from low branches. It always paused before crossing open spaces, tilting its head to listen. It never rushed unless startled, but when it moved fast, its speed was shocking. Mira's mind worked quietly as she watched. On Vareen, her elders had taught her that hunting was not always about strength. Sometimes the land itself could be your weapon. That morning, she set her plan into motion. She climbed down from her perch and began preparing the ground along the armored beast's path. Using a sharp stone, she cut thin vines and pulled away loose soil. She dug shallow pits and covered them with leaves, making them look like solid ground. These would not trap the beast completely, but they would slow it. And on Korath, slowing a predator could mean its end. By midday, she was ready. She climbed into a high branch above the path and waited. The forest was warm, and the air smelled of wet bark. In the distance, she heard the rustle of leaves, then the slow, steady steps she had been waiting for. The armored beast came into view, moving with its usual careful rhythm. It reached the first pit and stepped directly onto the false ground. The earth gave way, and one of its legs sank deep. The beast gave a sharp hiss and stumbled, trying to pull itself free. That was when the second part of Mira's plan arrived, a sound like rushing wind, followed by the heavy crash of something huge. From the side, through the trees, came another predator, a long-bodied creature with claws, as long as Mira's arm. Its eyes locked on the struggling beast, and it lunged. Mira did not move. She simply watched as the two predators met in a burst of sound and force. The armored beast managed to pull free, but not before the clawed creature raked deep marks into its side. They clashed for only moments before the armored beast retreated into the forest, limping. The clawed creature gave a final growl and turned away, vanishing into the shadows. Mira's heart was steady. She had not needed to fight either of them. She had let the land and its dangers fight for her. This was the turning point. Until now, she had been only an observer, testing and learning. Now she was shaping the events of the jungle. She was part of the chain of danger, not as prey, but as a force that could influence it. The days that followed proved it. She began choosing her position in the forest, not for safety, but for advantage. She learned to guide predators toward one another by leaving signs of her presence, a broken branch here, a scent trail there. Once she watched a pair of tree-dwelling hunters chase each other into the territory of a massive horned beast. The battle that followed echoed through the jungle for hours, and Mira did not need to lift a finger. Her shelter changed, too. She no longer hid in the same tree each night. Instead, she built several sleeping spots across a wide area, some high in the branches, others in hollow logs or woven into thick bushes. This way, no predator could track her easily. Food became easier to find. She knew where to catch small game and where to gather safe plants. She even found a vine that, when burned, gave off a strong, bitter smoke that made most creatures keep their distance. She wove pieces of the vine into her sleeping places as a warning. The armored beast, though injured, still walked the forest. Mira saw it again one morning, slower now, its movements heavier. It passed close to her hiding place, sniffing the air as if searching for something. She did not reveal herself. Not yet. She had no need to finish the hunt today. She was patient. That night. The forest seemed to notice her shift. The calls of some predators grew more cautious, and she heard fewer steps directly beneath her sleeping perch. The land had begun to treat her differently, not just as another living thing, but as something to be wary of. Lying against the trunk of her tree, Mira looked up at the stars between the leaves. Somewhere out there, the aliens who had sent her here probably imagined she was gone, another victim of Korath's wild dangers. They did not know that Korath was becoming her ally. In her mind, she began to form a new thought, not just to survive here, but to master it. To move through the forest not as an intruder, but as a presence that even the apex predators respected. When morning came again, she would track the armored beast, not to trap it this time, but to walk beside it in the shadows, unseen. She wanted to know where it drank, where it rested, where it felt safest. Because once she knew those things, the balance between them would change forever. For now, she closed her eyes, listening to the shifting music of the night, the growls, the wing beats, the rustling leaves. This was no longer the sound of a place trying to kill her. It was the sound of a place learning her name. The days on Korath began to blend into a steady rhythm. Mira hunted when she wished, rested when she chose, and moved through the jungle as if she had been born here. The forest no longer startled her. Every sound had meaning now, and every shadow was familiar. One morning, as the mist lifted from the trees, Mira crouched on a high branch watching the armored beast drink from a pool. It no longer limped, though a faint scar showed along its side where the clawed predator had struck it weeks ago. She felt no urge to kill it. It was part of the forest's balance now, just as she was. She shifted her gaze when a faint sound reached her ears. Not the movement of an animal, but something mechanical, distant, yet clear. It was a sound that did not belong to Korath. Mira stilled, listening. It came again, a soft hum, rising and falling. She followed it through the treetops, moving like a shadow among the leaves, until she saw it. Above a clearing, a small silver craft hovered, silently. Its surface shone in the sunlight, and its underside carried a round lens that glowed faintly blue. It was not a transport ship like the one that had dropped her here. This was smaller, lighter, a scout craft. Through the glass dome at its top, she saw two figures. They were not of the same race as the ones who had exiled her. These aliens were shorter, with pale skin patterned in faint stripes. They wore thin masks over their mouths and tapped at glowing panels before them. The lens beneath the craft moved, scanning the ground. Mira realized it was recording. She stayed perfectly still, high in the branches, her body hidden among leaves. Below, the armored beast stepped into the clearing. The scout craft drifted lower, focusing its lens on the creature. One of the aliens inside leaned forward eagerly. Then, from their point of view, something unexpected happened. The armored beast froze, its head tilting slightly. It had sensed her. Mira stepped from the shadows of the branch, landing silently. on a lower one just behind the beast. For a moment, she and the armored predator stood together in the clearing. The beast did not attack. It simply lowered its head to drink again, as if accepting her presence. The scout craft's lens swiveled rapidly between them. The aliens inside spoke quickly, their voices muffled but tense. Mira glanced up at the hovering ship. She knew it was watching her. She did not wave, did not call out. Instead, she stepped into the sunlight, standing tall beside the predator. Then, with deliberate slowness, she turned her back on the craft and walked into the trees, the beast following a few steps before peeling away into the shadows. The scout craft did not follow her, but she knew it would leave with what it had seen. Far above Korath, in the clean halls of an orbiting research station, the striped-skin aliens replayed the footage again and again. "It cannot be staged," one of them said, his voice uncertain. That was a Deathworlder, alone, walking beside one of Korath's alpha hunters. "Impossible," said the other, but his eyes did not leave the screen. They sent the recording to their homeworld, and from there it traveled across space, passing from station to station, from trader to trader. It was shown in quiet markets and in loud spaceports. Some dismissed it as a trick, a clever imitation. Others studied it closely, noting the calm in the human girl's movements, the way the predator had accepted her. The story began to grow. In the capital city of the race that had exiled her, a council member received the footage and froze as he recognized her face. Mira, the girl they had sent to Korath to be forgotten. "She lives," he whispered, though no one in the room answered. Back on Korath, Mira noticed the change long before. She saw another craft. The forest's sky began to hold strange glints of light at times, far above the treetops. She heard the faint hum of engines at night, distant but present. The jungle predators seemed restless, their patterns disturbed by the unnatural sounds. One afternoon, while she was setting a line of baited snares, she found a small piece of metal on the forest floor, thin, polished, and stamped with markings. She did not know. It was too smooth to be a fragment from anything natural. She slipped it into her pouch and kept moving. By the end of that week, a second scout craft appeared. This time it followed her from a distance as she walked along a ridge. She ignored it, continuing her work, checking traps, gathering vines, and cutting sharp stones for tools. At sunset, she stood at the edge of a cliff, looking out over the endless forest. The craft hovered behind her, its lens glowing softly. Without turning, she spoke aloud, her voice steady. "If you are watching," she said, "know this. I am not here to be saved." She did not know if the watchers could hear her, but she felt the words were worth saying. The craft stayed for a few minutes longer, then turned and vanished into the horizon. In the following days, the jungle returned to its normal rhythm, but Mira knew it would not last. The sight of her among Korath's predators would spread far and wide now. It would reach traders, mercenaries, explorers, and eventually even the rulers who had abandoned her. Whether they saw her as a threat or as something to study, they would not forget her, but Mira was not afraid. If they came to Korath, they would find her ready. Not as the girl they had sent to die, but as someone who had made this world her own. That night, sitting in the high branches with the forest's sounds all around her, she allowed herself a small thought that made her lips curl into a faint smile. If they wanted to see what a Deathworlder could do, she would show them, and they would learn, just as Korath had learned, that she was not prey. The twin moons cast a silver glow over the jungle, turning every leaf and shadow into a moving shape. The air was cool, but filled with the quiet hiss of distant streams and the rustle of hidden creatures. Mira stood on a high ridge, her eyes scanning the land below. Somewhere out there, the largest predator she had ever faced was on the move. The alien hunters who once thought they could claim the planet for themselves were now reduced to whispers in the undergrowth. They no longer moved in large groups. They no longer set traps without looking over their shoulders. Mira's presence had changed the balance of the planet. The predators were not just beasts anymore. They were intelligent, well-trained killers, and yet they feared one human girl. Tonight, she was not hiding. Tonight, she was making herself visible. She wanted them to know she was close. Her plan was simple. Make them chase her, lead them into the canyon where her traps were ready, and end the long game of fear they had played with her. Mira crouched and drew a mark on a stone with crushed berry paste, a sign she knew the hunters had learned to understand. It meant I am here. She placed the stone in the middle of a clear path in plain view. Then she moved into the shadows and waited. It didn't take long. She heard them before she saw them. Light footsteps, careful breathing, the sound of claws brushing against bark. The hunters spoke to each other in their strange, clicking language, their tone tense. One of them reached for the marked stone and hissed. Mira moved back silently, leading them away without them knowing they were following her on purpose. She made sure to leave small signs, a broken branch here, a fresh footprint there. The chase began slowly, the hunters thinking they had the upper hand. But with every step, she brought them closer to the canyon. The jungle grew denser as the night deepened. The moonlight barely touched the ground now, and the sounds of other creatures filled the dark. The hunters quickened their pace. They were confident now, thinking their numbers would trap her. Mira could almost feel their excitement behind her. She reached the canyon just before dawn. The cliffs rose high on both sides, and the narrow path ahead looked like an easy place to corner her. Exactly what she wanted them to think. She moved halfway into the canyon, then stopped, listening. The hunters entered behind her, their shadows stretching long in the first morning light. Mira's hand brushed against a vine hidden in the rocks. With one quick pull, a row of heavy logs swung down from above, sealing the canyon's entrance. The hunters spun around, but the way back was gone. Before they could regroup, a sharp sound echoed, the release of her second trap. Nets made from twisted plant fiber fell from above, tangling limbs and weapons. The hunters struggled, but the fibers were tough and sticky with sap. Mira stepped forward, her voice calm. "You came for me. Now you can leave the way I choose." The hunters froze. They could see the narrow exit ahead, one that led deeper into the canyon, not back into the jungle. Mira had left it open on purpose. It would lead them into an area swarming with the planet's natural predators. She knew they would survive if they were careful, but they would never try hunting her again. One by one, the hunters began moving toward the exit. Their leader paused, looking back at Mira. She held his gaze without fear. For a long moment, the air was heavy with understanding. They had learned something about her, about humans. When the last hunter disappeared into the shadows of the deeper canyon, Mira climbed the ridge above. The traps had worked perfectly, but more importantly, the message was clear. She was not prey. She was the one who decided who hunted and who ran. As the sun rose, painting the sky gold, Mira sat quietly and watched the land. The jungle was hers now, not through ownership, but through respect. Even the predators seemed to sense it. Her heart was steady. She knew the game was not over. Somewhere beyond the horizon, more hunters might come. And when they did, the planet would teach them the same lesson, or Mira would. The jungle was quiet, but the air was thick with change. The soft sounds of leaves rustling and distant bird calls filled the space around Mira as she sat high in her favorite tree, looking out over the endless green sea below. Korath was no longer just a planet where she had been sent to die. It was her home, her kingdom. Word of the Deathworlder who survived Korath had spread far beyond the thick black trees and sharp claws of the jungle. Ships came and went near the planet's orbit, scanning, observing, hoping to catch a glimpse of the girl who had tamed the wildest world in the galaxy. Some came with weapons, some with curiosity, and some with respect. Mira felt none of their fear. She had grown stronger here, stronger than anyone could have guessed. The jungle had tested her and forged her into something new, a hunter, a guardian, and a symbol. One morning, as the pale sun began to warm the forest, Mira heard a soft hum above the treetops. She looked up and saw a small scout ship descending slowly through the mist. Its silver surface caught the light, and the lens on its underside scanned the trees. This time, the ship did not hide its presence. It landed softly in a clearing nearby. 2 figures stepped out, not enemies, but envoys. Their faces were calm and curious. They carried no weapons. One of them spoke, his voice gentle but clear. "We have come to speak with the one they call Mira," he said. Mira stepped down from her tree and walked toward them, her eyes steady and unafraid. "We have watched you," the envoy continued. "You have done what none thought possible. You have made Korath your home and made its hunters respect you. You have changed the story of this planet." Mira nodded. "I did not come here to be forgotten," she said simply. "I came here to live." The envoys smiled, as if hearing the truth of many untold stories in her words. They spoke of their worlds, of alliances and challenges, and of the fear some still held of Deathworlders like her. But they also spoke of respect earned, through strength, wisdom, and courage. Mira listened, then looked out across the jungle. She thought of the first night she had spent high in the trees, alone and hunted. She thought of the creatures that had become her teachers, the traps she had set, and the hunters she had outwitted. Korath was alive in her now, and she was alive in it. The envoys asked if she would join them, not as a captive or a prisoner, but as a representative. Someone to show others that survival was not just about strength, but about understanding and respect. Mira agreed. When the envoys returned to their ship, Mira watched them leave, feeling a new path opening before her. She was no longer just a Deathworlder sent to die. She was a legend.